Frederica put it herself.
I think it's a live mic.
Welcome very, very much to this segment of Conversations, where I'm really, truly very pleased to be speaking with Glen and Mildred Robbins Leet, and they've become involved with a very exciting program, the Trickle Up Program. Mr. Leet, Mrs. Leet, welcome very, very much to Conversation.
Delighted to be here.
It's a great pleasure.
I wonder if you might, Glen Leet, to explain to us, you've been involved with questions of community development and with an approach toward the problems of people in the developing portions of the world over a long and distinguished career. I wonder if maybe you could share a little bit with us your own development and your own concern in these areas, and perhaps share with the general audience the concept of community development, which you had an absolute pioneering hand in developing in this country.
Well, thank you. I began with community development in Greece in 1944. When I was Director of Welfare for UNRRA, United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Agency for Greece. And we had $400 million to aid in rehabilitation, and with that we saved many people from starvation, and it was a good program. But one thing we discovered is there were many people who were poor before the program started and that were at the end of it. And so as we searched trying to find out, we found that in almost all of the poorest areas of the country, there were people who had ideas of their own, times of their own. They had friends who would work with them, but they didn't want to carry out anything that people would tell them they must do.
Yes.
Because they're very independent. And so we developed a countrywide program encouraging people to make their own plans. And then that became a countrywide program. It had a rather spectacular result. And so the United Nations asked me to become chief of the Community Development Unit. And I've worked with 50 countries in different parts of the world, helping develop programs that will motivate people to do things themselves to raise their levels of living.
To truly help people help themselves in a long-term basis rather than an immediate emergency need, which is very often the case is needed, but ways that can help them out so that we can get past some of the problems in a long-term basis, and also one that respects the culture and the individuality of the people involved.
And Millie and I went back to Greek villages a couple of years ago and saw some of the communities that had started in 1948 and had a permanent high level of prosperity as a result of the fact that through those early works they did, they had full-time employment, they had year-round agriculture, instead of, as they had begun, with just a short season production and a long period of unemployment.
So the concept of community development, which I'm afraid is probably not well enough understood in this country as it ought be and as it will be, we would hope, is one that genuinely relates to the needs of the, let's say, if in Latin America, the campesino or the village level people in their own terms, in their own cultural terms, and helps them with supplies that can get them moving to help their own situation, right? And that's a unique kind of approach toward aid or support or...
It's different down.
So often is the case with American support.
The trickle-down theory is put enough money in through corporations, through ministries, through departments, and by sending high technology, that probably sooner or later trickle down and benefit people at the bottom level. It's too slow and it trickles down very far.
Very often it creates...
Because there's an inexhaustible capacity in most developing countries to utilize most of the aid in the capital city.
The people are that
Yes, and now there's something new about trickle up. For years...
You mean trickle down. The trickle down, which everybody thought was going to be a great success in the 1950s and the 1960s. By the 1970s, a lot of us in the international field were recognizing that it just wasn't trickling down, and that the gap between the rich people in the capital and the poor people in the rural and ghetto areas or the urban areas, they were getting poorer, and everybody has been and still is seeking a way to enable the poorest poor to help themselves so that they can get a better chance at a livelihood, which everyone wants. Nobody wants to be dependent. Everybody would like to be independent.
I think that's probably a universal human trait, that I don't think anyone likes parasitism. that or dependency.
What
and
happens,
to the degree people can be independently able to take care of their own needs and help themselves, that's a recognized benefit no matter what your political ideology.
Yes.
That's a good thing in terms of human development.
And the program program is operating in countries with various types of forms of government.
The Trickle Up Program that you two have initiated.
See,
For example, there's a great difference between Costa Rica and Haiti.
Yes, right.
But it seems to work equally.
And Guyana.
Yes.
And you've also been involved for a long time in
terms
international
of
development
international relations, worked at the
relates,
UN, and most particularly as it relates to women.
Uh-huh.
And what's curious is that our Trickle Up program is offered to both men and women as an opportunity to engage in income production. We find that almost 85% of the projects are now women's projects.
Yeah.
And, you know, one says, well, how come when you were offered it both to men and women? Well, as you go around the world, you realize that women are of the poor, and they're the last ones to be offered anything, and something perhaps it isn't in the best interest, but they are told what to do, and they have a chance of doing what they just know how to do.
Yeah.
And also, what is very interesting is that more and more women, not only here in the United States, are head roles.
Yes, all right.
And it's a very important thing to recognize and Trickle Up. It's curious how it's turned about, because a lot of people who have been working in the international field, particularly in the women's field, recognize that women are central to development, except that the development planners and decision makers haven't recognized that as yet.
Yeah.
So suddenly our results are pointing up what a lot of us have felt. Woman is very often the invisible economic factor, and that people don't recognize it. You know, when Glenn was mentioning that we went back to the early days when he started the community development programs in Greece, and we visited one village, and they remembered, Mr. Leet, the elder.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting thing to hear them saying they all had worked on the roads, and of course I was there, so I couldn't resist, and I said, did any women work on the roads? Oh, no, no. And then suddenly, I looked a little bit surprised. Suddenly one man said, well, now that I recall, my two daughters worked. And then someone said, well, now that you mention it, and suddenly you realize there were even more women than men that had worked on the road, but they really had not acknowledged it to themselves.
Right,
it's that hidden, invisible activity that women are, they're not even counted in the gross national product. They are economic addition.
We do want to talk some about the specific development of the Trickle Up program and some characteristics. But then also a long career, as it were, in terms of international development and the concerns of women, particularly in your own life, as it were, then.
Well, she's brought to the something very important, a realization, great potential of women, a realization that throughout the world now, women are determined to improve their status, and discover the most effective way to improve their status is to be involved in income-producing activities. And when women have money in themselves, it does for their self-respect and for their status in relation to families.
It's probably true of everyone again, isn't it?
Sure.
If they can earn their own way, that's a universally recognized good quality that comes out psychologically in the people. It begins to get the process moving,
Now let's tell about the specifics of community development.
Yeah.
We've crystallized our approach in a very specific proposition.
You hear it Trickle Up with the Trickle Up
you
program.
mean community development as it has evolved into the Trickle Up program.
Yes.
We brought it up to date.
Right, all right, fine. And
It says in effect that if a group of 5 or more people have plans that they've made themselves to produce an income, and if they will work at least 1,000 hours within a 3-month period, that ensures that it's a intensive activity. And if they will reinvest at least 20% of their profit in their own business, and if it's one which is continuing, then apply $100. $50 is presented to them immediately the moment they present an application, and $50 paid when we receive a report certified by a representative that shows that they have met the conditions of the grant. Work is continuing. And that is such a simple proposition that we find in 54 countries people respond. Whereas officials with aid agencies may say, what can anybody do with $50?
Yeah, that's right.
But that's a fortune to many people among the poorest people in the world.
Yes, I think it's probably good to recognize a good deal of it. They have they have income over the whole of the year, $100. So $100 is a great deal of money, and it's also getting right into their hands rather than going through
that's exactly
administrative agency that tends to take a lot of that.
It is an immediate cash payment. What is different about the Trickle Up program is that you go to a group of people and ask them, what do they know how to do? What have they talked about and have they skills? And when they fill out the application about what they plan to produce, market, how much to charge for it, how much profit do they think they have to make it a feasible project to engage in. As I'm giving you these points on the application, really a training tool. It's saying you have to figure all of this before you want to go into business, because you just can't go into business and say, well, I like to make jams or jellies or X. I have a skill and I have to know, will I be able to get the material that I need, and will I be able to produce it, and where will I sell it? And they have to figure all of that out. So when we say they fill out that application, it's just not the name of the group and their location. They have to really do a little bit of thinking, and it's really very interesting to meet with people who have never been given really an opportunity to make a decision and to make plans for themselves, to see how their bodies themselves body language. But you know, when you meet with people initially who are poor and who have very little self-respecting, then they're sitting and they're downcast and their shoulders are drooping. And as you talk and you ask, how much do you think you're worth? They have never thought of their work being worth anything. And they sit around and they say, well, it's not worth anything. And then someone says, well, maybe 50. No, maybe it's worth $1. And with each of that position, you see their body is rising up. And finally, let's say they arrive at a figure $1 an hour. Well, if they're going to invest $1, they're giving $1,000.
All right, right.
And they're only getting $100. So really giving far more than they're getting.
Yeah, I see, right.
Gives a sense of power, of self-respect, of dignity, and a realization that what they have themselves is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Another important thing is, Trickle Up, we don't try to teach people how to do things they don't know how to do.
I was going to say, they would have in their normal
It's
course
encourage
of
them to do things that they already know how to do. And of course, it's expensive to train people to do things they don't know how to do, and very often it doesn't work out well.
Well, now, if they know how to do that, and we're going to talk about some of the specifics that are actually being developed under this program and so forth.
Right.
They weren't able to just go ahead and start doing that without this support that you give them? I mean, couldn't they just go ahead and made the
fact they could have done most of the things.
Is that money that helps get the thing going?
I don't know that it's the seed money. I have a feeling, sure, it's the seed money to some extent. I think the idea of someone really believing in that they can do it, because have said, you know, when you left and we started, we realized we started it ourselves without you, but we need to give us the push.
See, the one thing that you asked, why didn't they do it, or why couldn't they do it? The fact was of confidence. A person would have an idea, another would say, that's no good, you never could do that. You've never done anything like that. And so the missing element is confidence in themselves, lack of an image of success. And that's why it's so important to begin with something very small.
I wonder also, it might sound, again, from people who are in the United States and some people who speak in terms of millions of dollars of capital investment and so forth, that $50, which doesn't seem like very much, might actually be in capital terms, in terms of like jars needed or whatever it is needed, is a real capital incentive for them to be able to get the investments that will, in a certain business sense, pay for them and to give them a little jump up in that direction. Yeah, I can see where it could make a difference.
In Port-au-Prince in Haiti, there's a woman whose family is now in business. laundress, and there was no way she could support on the earnings as a laundress. With $50, she started in business the stock. She had a table about a fourth the size of this table, and on it, well, what can you do to very poor people in a slum area? They have soap, they have kerosene, they have to have matches and charcoal, and those are the things that she sells to them. The $50 was enough to get her the first week's stock. With the profit from that, she's been able to increase her stock. And when we went there, she was saying now she has capital so she can buy sale, so that the profit on everything she sells will be much greater.
And that little $50 going in that course,
sure.
Absolutely,
which would have been possible. It really is a crucial bridge maker.
It is the link.
Could I back up just a little bit? And
sure.
You've had a long and distinguished career, both of you, in terms of particular community development. So, did the UP program, and it's a it's a private development on your part. When did it get started? When did you get the idea, and when did you, how was it going?
1979.
Yeah.
The first project started on May 9th. And it is a little different that whereas in community development, one people to work together for the whole community.
Yes.
Well, that is a good thing when the infrastructure of communities developed. But in inflation, rising cost of living, it's very important to have more people producing more goods and services. What we're trying to do is motivate people to produce goods and services. The immediate motivation is to make an income for themselves.
Okay.
As they collectively, they're doing something about rising living costs and the productivity of their nation.
It's a very curious thing you're saying. How did we start?
I'm saying
First, I'd like to say I got married about 8.5 years ago.
Okay.
And we sort of pooled our resources. We met when I was conducting a seminar at the UN on disaster relief, and he was one of the experts.
Yes,
And, well, we ended up by getting married a year later.
Yes,
and it's been a joint together of our experiences.
Very
and
good, yeah.
in that intervening period, we kept hearing at every UN conference about the need for the participation of people, about the need for reaching out to the poor. Agency, whether it was international or national, is still seeking a way to reach the of the poor. And out of our joint experiences came the organization, the non-profit organization called Trickle Up Program.
And
really
it's supported now by private contributions from many sources.
You initially started the Trickle Up program, you like as a private citizenry, or think you didn't try and get the United Nations or some government agency to accept the principles and put into the active aid agency or something like that. You wanted to do it as a private foundation because maybe it's more efficient. You can actually moving that way, or what? Or what
we find that if you're going to present an evolutionary approach, it's not enough to just talk about it in theory. I've talked about it in theory. People just won't believe it until we demonstrate it. And the reason why we're approaching 54 countries, or doing it all in one country, is we wanted to demonstrate that it was a valid law that was applicable in many countries and many cultures.
And could be applicable in a way that you could get started tomorrow. You wouldn't have to be going.
The thing is, you hit on a crucial word, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because what we
Maybe this
do
afternoon,
is encourage when a group signs that application and is given that $50 check, they're encouraged to start tomorrow, or as we say, to start immediately, because we also find that in diminish each succeeding day. And so we like to feel the kinds of projects they start, they can the next day.
Most things do start immediately. And part of the motivation is for women who say, I'm going to wait, how long are you going to wait for some man to come and offer you a job? Keep waiting indefinitely, your own.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Just like you. Did you wait for somebody to give you a job? You started?
Well, that's true enough. As a matter of fact, a combination has led to that kind of thing, right? And you do try to encourage that kind of thing in the...
Oh, yeah.
Really is absolutely whole process of the trickle up.
You had the idea in 1979. Where did you go first? How did you start first? How did you decide? Who did you get in touch with?
We picked the island of Dominica because statistics showed that it was one of the poorest countries. It had a deteriorating economy. It had a high rate of inflation. It had a great unemployment, a low per capita income, and it was relatively close.
In terms of geography, because since it is in the Caribbean between Martinique and Guadeloupe, it was much easier to have access to.
And then it took some financing.
We financed ourselves
to begin with. All right, you financed it to start yourself, and you went there?
There.
And you made with people there? Did you get in contact with the poor?
Well, I got in contact, first of all, with the Secretary of the Ministry Concerned with Development.
All right.
I was fascinated by the theory. Would we meet with this staff? Yes. And would we suggest he have staff of private agencies there with him. These people who are in contacts with groups all over the island. We discussed the theory and held a workshop. And then I agreed to it in principle. We went with them in communities that the first group we went to was a group of people at Ben's who decided what they wanted to do with it. And so started making wine, and it was quite successful operation until a hurricane came and destroyed all the
city. Yeah,
well, I must say that Hurricane David was a devastating.
And it destroyed the fruit, but the trees that the fruit grew. So they had got the magic of producing and selling and profit. So they started growing some ginger and made ginger wine, and that's better than any of the others.
They did, and that was the first project that you, in a certain sense, gave support to.
That was,
in this kind of
and
a way?
you know, back this past January. No, I think it was March, and we saw the wine is still being made. The women are still earning money, and they're convinced that it helped them enormously. Extraordinary kind of thing. Persevered. This is a business that did not exist before the Trickle Up Program. It exists today, 4 years.
And that's going in, and then from that beginning point, you can see it work there, and then you went project in that began to expand into other countries.
No, we started 10 projects during that first period. Are functioning as industries.
Fantastic. That's a good track record. In terms of
we think it's extraordinary.
It really is, right. And then,
now, these are not huge businesses.
I understand it.
But these are businesses that enable to help life.
Yes,
they're able to support themselves. They're earning money where they did not earn money before.
And it would be relatively small, jam, wine on a small scale,
well,
and so
forth. Well, if I could just on this table, some banana chips.
Right, okay.
Now, the banana chips was started by a group of women in in Marigot.
Yeah.
And we met with the women when we first started. There was so many bananas grow in Dominica. It's one of their major.
Sure.
And much more rot on the ground ducks.
Okay.
And so the women were aware that this was a resource that they could use, but what could they make? Decided to make banana chips. Now there's a great process error that comes into making banana chips for anybody who cooks. You know, you put a into a pot of fat, and sometimes it will burn and won't cook, and then you realize you need an evenness in the way you slice your bananas. Well, they went all through the process, and they finally developed banana chips that not only sold out, because they were successful in this enterprise, they attracted the attention of a group in Massachusetts, this group, who heard about them and their success, and has given them a further grant with they are able to purchase appropriate machinery that they now can slice bananas, as you can see, the same size. They have now a machine that teaches them and take the cellophane bag and put a label on it. It's called Marigot Banana Chips. Called the Banana Bunch. When we went to visit the woman who her in quarters, which she was able to afford to rent for a 10-year period, and not only was the machinery full, not where the product, but she was beautiful. There was this enormous transformation in this.
And you had met her before?
We had met her 2 years.
Struggling along and trying to get this, and knew how to do it, but they hadn't been able to.
It was tough. This is a woman with 4 children and sole supporter of her household.
Right.
She is supporting her household of young. And she's a beautiful woman.
Do you encourage that kind of thing? We were saying before, you have a $100 grant which begins to get it started, get confidence in going. Would you support or be supportive of other people? You said Methodist group. Support to these projects, and you try to liaison between other people who could do that? It adds another dimension of capitalism.
It gives a visibility of people who are trying hard and achieving that enable to get support from other sides. Very often they were able to get loans, for example.
But at the same time, you have to very wisely, because that could eventually, one would think, I don't know, if they're doing that in a way where they're making a profit on it, let's say, that could bring those people to the normal commercial banking avenues where you could get credit to buy machinery that would pay for itself. Bring them into the mainstream of that so that those kind of lending agencies could begin to develop. If I may, have the ability also to keep your mind out, because then reach that state, they're no longer the poorest of the poor. Responsibility of keeping your quest some more of the poorest of the poor in that way. Am I more or less your sense of man?
Because what we're really, our goal is to encourage groups to start business, not in business. Some of them have started before and have not succeeded. Some have received training in many areas from UN agencies, aid, and they're doing nothing with the training. Along we come and say, have some sewing machine, train, and then you just ask a question, and before you know it, they're off and running, and
they're filling in the answers. They know once they begin to see a thing.
Very interesting.
One very important point is that although there is a phenomenal rate of success from these projects, it doesn't mean that the other approaches to development are superior. It's like a spark plug that will make the fuel and the engine move a bit forward. Spark plug is important. You still have to have the fuel in the engine. So the fact that people have received by other programs, well, if programs, they wouldn't be so to these things.
Yeah, but don't you think that for many of us who are concerned, we have new concerns arising, drought conditions arising in Africa, again, its ugly face after these kind of things, and many people of goodwill are wondering in a certain sense how the highly developed can relate to the economy. And that we have not, many people have a sense, we don't have way efficiently relating to the cultural heritage of the in a realistic way, and actually seeing at the local level is, for that reason, is rather in a certain sense unique as part of foreign policy, the right term. Or,
it is a part of a foreign policy.
The world connection it has. I mean, in a sense,
it means the United States in its relationship with countries should emphasize its respect for people of those their potential.
Right.
Technique to involve the potential of people, measures that improve the enormous resource. There are so many under people in the world. If you technique that can activate them, it's much more important than any type of or energy. It's the human energy.
Yeah, right. The energy. If you can begin to tap some of the human resources there to the thing and so forth, that would. It would seem to me could be advantageous in terms of the American approach. From the perspective we're being.
Right. We've had a very experience with the people most recently.
Please share.
Curious kind of. We went from a couple Peace Corps years in the seminar 2 years ago, and they said about us in one of the professional journals and. Up program, and we'd be very interested to see how that could go. And we said, is the tool that coordinators, and a $50 check. So, and it could start. Well, happily, 2 years we find now 18 in the Solomon Islands because there's other Peace Corps parts of the Solomon Islands and have felt this was a way that could help. This first prepared and they found the island from one little village to the other, and it was a very way in which the Trickle Up Program is helping people help themselves in the islands with this.
From that beginning, did we first got started down into, did I hear you say 54?
54.
Incredibly wide geographical region. Please.
This is what started talking islands.
Yeah.
I just let beautiful they have made.
Yeah.
And this is another one of.
Yeah.
And this is shipped because, as you can imagine, a lot of people on project product so that we example 54 countries has spread not gone from country to country. It is by communication, by media, by people reading about us or about us. And Africa, we have a project in, we have a, actually there are two a man and a Mr. who started, I think it's 30 projects. 30
Cameroon. So you have a large-scale development happening in the Cameroon. This initiative couple, they've if that's the right word.
He has a PhD in agriculture at university. She has a master's degree in social work.
Okay.
Combine their skills together, and they're doing a perfectly marvelous job.
And again, this is outside necessarily any official contact or anything.
He is a professor at the University of Deshang.
All right. And he's doing it. He believes in the thing. Becoming involved with you people.
His private enterprise.
He's spending his own money for his travels.
Okay, right. Then that's kind of incentive and initiative there in the Cameroon. And in each countries where you have people that you liaison with who help do that. You'd have to have people working in each. Now, to be working.
I had a letter from a family in Pennsylvania who in Bolivia. Know the Trickle Up could be applied by her in Bolivia. Well, yes. We'll send her a manual. Checked it. The first project. If she succeeds, there'll be more, and if she doesn't succeed, probably she.
Dollars that's given to those people. Now that's a grant. That's not a.
That's a grant, what we like to think. Shake. It's good luck to you.
Yeah.
It's saying we believe that your succeed, and we're giving this to you not as a loan, but as a grant. We all know, but poor people feel the difficulty of it even than any of them are not that poor.
Right. Yeah.
And so an outright grant makes a difference. They're not afraid to take a chance. They're encouraged business. There's nothing holding. They're not going to have to pay it back if they don't succeed. And the curious thing, no group has and run off with it.
Nobody?
Nobody.
No.
What they have done, some businesses have not.
Yes. Right. Well, that
in the best of families.
Well, I was going to say, if they were going to try capitalization through commercial circles, they own for something that would pay for itself in a reasonable, would be the function of commercial banking. But very often the people don't really have access to that. It's outside cultural realm. They don't have collateral. Right. $50, which seems so small. That's a great deal. Right, huh? Didn't mean to.
And then banks or institutions, because there are many governmental that would like to give people in the developing countries, but those are loans that thousands of dollars. Now, a lot of people have never handled $1,000. Less $100 is manageable. $50.
Right.
what to do, and to grow.
Yeah.
$1,000. The first question is, who's going to go on the payroll?
Yes, that kind of thing.
That's the beginning of discord.
Right, and that's something you don't want to do because you want them to be able to put their own labor and the time that way by having these. Absolutely marvelous. It's an absolute idea. And one now that becomes, if I may, $50, that is $100 throw. That is a considerable amount. How are you finance this?
Well,
philanthropic kinds of part of Americans, or how is that done? I don't mean to.
Actually, part of it.
You know, I mean, you if you
that tells about the program and different and only have 100, and then we got the ruling from the department they would tax. About as had any need for them.
Okay, good.
Now we have the problem that there is a momentum in the that coming in.
Plus for support.
Faster than we can reach.
That there are a field from coordinators that say, I would like 20 more applications.
Right.
Now that means $2,000.
Right, okay. Right.
Well, we sent 5 checks projects, and when we see about the future. Another is had 200 wanted to send us, and we said, but sooner or later to be in a position to, on a larger scale. Our ultimate goal is not to build up a big organization of our own. Have technology, this method, by funding agencies such USA, World Bank, the United Nations program, and we'd like to see more of the large foundations and organizations utilizing this, because we believe that it would multiply the effectiveness of their work that they're doing.
Governmental grants and intergovernmental, that's one thing I'd like to program incorporated to voluntary organizations overseas. And organizations work in country and with which we are working, but international.
Well, I should think a lot of people in this country who have a concern to be, in a certain sense, happy to, in a sense, you know, in that sense, because the good track record, and that's where the support is to be just administrative costs, or people in ghettos and around the country world actually go. There probably a great deal of people private would be help you to support and help you along, kind of thing. You maintain that context.
This is a very important part of it. That's why one of the things that is unique is that we administrative costs down, have the get the money to the people.
Right.
Go for equipment, and it doesn't go for advice.
Right.
The money goes to people.
Yeah.
Who in the country to carry on a payroll, because they all payroll, whether it's ministry or whether UCA or
sort of as a labor of love.
Labor of because it really is care about the people they're working with, and if they care about making the for Trickle Up, help carry out their own goals. They Trickle Up as reaching out. Because we do not have that extra dollars. They don't have, which is a marginal tool.
Yeah.
And them into their countryside.
Sure.
It makes quite a difference, which is, and that also helps spread the, give confidence that to be dependent. This is an aspect of make people dependent on actors. Independent, if you dependent entrepreneurs, and that way they built up their own, their quality, And of course, ultimately, increase.
Of course.
And we are in, and we all know how country is affected by what the country is doing. I mean, all we have to do is 19 raise the prices.
Yeah.
We know we're all an independent world. That is so. If other countries that level, everybody level up.
Yes.
National interest to increase the quality of life of all of the people.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. It's a having it's a matter of having some sort of a way of tapping the resources of the people that they have to those things that they're produce these products, like you showed this and the bananas. They got something you got to.
This is food from the island of Antigua, and there are groups of women working that government agents much concerned about giving to produce and sell items that are secured from local products and can be locally. And so they started on the jam preserve. This, of course, is the lava.
Now they will market these. They'll market in the local market. Local
supermarket. They also
these groups school children in of Antigua. Parent, one of the knew how to make it. Them how with the nice weed.
It's beautiful.
And the broom about 3 months, and so continue villages.
Another aspect that has, you know, when you're starting an experiment, what happen?
Right.
We have found that many industries are concerned happens to students when they graduate.
Sure.
And when they graduate, have any that they can make a job for themselves.
One minister employed out of school and never have had a job or a dynamite case.
True. True.
So, shown an interest in the Trickle Up Program, and now we're working with schools, particularly being and is that the students trained, whether it's the broom, also gardening. We talk about vegetable gardening. They are taught how to break the soil, it, how to market it. They know how to price it. They know how to keep one school or a group of young people had baskets, and they had that you could see was the beginning of being for a regular. In this little book that they had, were making how much material and what kind of material, how long it took them to make, what was the cost of the material, they had to go up. This, of course, has a happy end because people, they went into business years of age. They are still producing baskets.
Now, these into government or in political structure, power structure, logical economic arrangement. This is something that are tending to be socialistic, governments that are tending other than that. Matter what the overall context is in your experience. It's entrepreneurial, as kind of incentive, or do you understand?
But it's not really. It's really people help themselves. Governments help the poorest of their poor, and it really is like a way of helping the people in their communities, helping themselves. So at this point, we have got encouragement from government some responsibility because people need to help themselves.
You don't find that there's any concern about that? Let's say if there were kind of a little bit concerned about the political or the implications, may have been may have to be trodden or getting that by the fact that they stir up a democratic entrepreneurial
I found that when I was in Korea, we had a program that became countrywide, showing a great deal of initiative and really what local initiative can. So he them until I found to say this is into him. It is not bureaucracy to get things done. The people. So
and you do you understand what my question?
I can give you an example.
Please.
We one non-governmental which is concerned with training and 5 villages around 80, and each one of the groups of women are trying to be learning. Now you wonder, how can we them if each one of these little village groups have an organization, machine, and they have a stove. But as they said to them, we weren't doing anything with them. Trickle then moved to the acting stage. And so and we have visited, I think, 9 of the villages the last time we were there. They are learning and producing school uniforms, selling out on the school uniforms, selling out. In fact, one of the villages, the bakery is so well, they have that you don't sell it, but we don't have any left over. So you see, they're really doing extremely well. Now opening a branch. Now, I don't see this as it is helping each group, every one of the villages to help themselves. Interesting thing about Haiti, if I can, it also international decade, and there was a decade conference in Copenhagen held in 1990, and at that convention to all forms of discrimination against women, the Haitian Marie Camille Lafontaine, Copenhagen, she signed the convention on behalf of her government. When we were just this November 82, very interesting thing to at that moment we were there, the law was being implemented. We went to, we village women, you know about law? You didn't have which law? Which law? Because it's free. Wonder, well, any different? Well, you see, it's the old French law. And in that law, women are citizens, they're minors. So we're going to be able to own property.
To inherit property.
I mean, even in a...
You'd be running up against a traditional pattern that this is going to perhaps change, and so change we're trying to introduce in terms of people psychologically only in the established thing. Introduce.
It's a fascinating thing. Will happen. All are to stop business. Not only economic, it's a lot. Confidence. If they can produce something, then they are able to sell it. And then they have a little bit more money. This is a slow, but steady, firm way of growth.
Now we have in the developing world or the third world, world marketplaces that people traditionally, the campesinos, the market they can in terms of the marketplace of trying to work and entrepreneur and that kind of support more efficient kinds of ways that in a certain sense do things efficiently have been. If that begins to get carried to a number of 54 countries and so many problems, do you think that the number could, those that you have, could be doubled by factors of hundreds? And does this begin to get out?
There's no question about
it. There be more.
Something like 120 countries doing. If you numbers of people that, well, just for example, we can enough food for and well, then you food. Enough people grew the food rather than. The countries over the years they have become accustomed to using a lot of their money for export. They have gotten out of the habit of growing fruit, selling them. Therefore, the really in which people can not only help but is by themselves.
Okay.
That's a very real way.
Agriculture.
Yeah. Goes beyond if you bring it into that market and people use the substitute things of vegetables they grow rather than import
things in export market. If they develop, could they start exporting?
Certainly.
Certainly could have a market in the United States.
So would
and then have
done.
And this table can't really see all things on is that now a lot of these things could be easily marketed.
A lot of the things that are made in the names of everyday standards of living in sense really are the very highest art form. Done in a very simple way, particularly when you have those inputs of huge skill that people traditionally have.
It takes to develop a mechanism to attract an export market and gear your production. It's a totally different way of production using local market. There are exogenous factors that are involved that I think have to be considered.
You have to mention one person, for example, Paul Taylor, who's well over 70. When she was 6 years old, she displayed great in handicraft, in needlework.
Yes.
Over her life, she's perfected that. She's famous. Anything that she is in great demand.
Yes.
She didn't have to be skilled. She knew it. She's a very effective creator. She's on the island of Nevis, but she had never, as a business, people together under her leadership very well. And in addition to that, they're teaching young people, and it's discouraging to try to teach young people to do things unless they see a future in it.
Yes.
But when they see the big demand that there is for this, and it can not only satisfy and be profitable, they learn.
Yeah, be profitable in a sense where you're going to be able to pay for the cost of the thing and move it ahead, so you get a little bit anyway. It doesn't have to be wildly profitable, but it's somewhat profitable.
It seems that Lily Bell Taylor, we asked her, she says, not my people, when we asked her where she sold it. We find a lot of the handicrafts that are made in the Caribbean islands are very often sold to those islands who have out, living in countries such as the States or in England and France. And it's a little bit of home.
So if you get a series of people, entrepreneurs as it were, who are doing a thing like that, there might be, what you say, 5 that are minimally involved in a project like that. They begin to get a business going. Do you find that they are good candidates for helping to, in a certain sense, with your traditional thinking of community development, involved? There are people who are catalysts, the community moving into development-minded help in terms of.
Now, you mentioned merely the project. We realized that making and we said, well, the profit. They said, well, we some money for school, and we contributed money and worked on for the community.
Fantastic, you see? So there you are in a position to help be catalyzed towards community development goals that you started out with a long time ago at the beginning of all.
So
getting back to my first love.
Absolutely. First love, and one that's far too poorly understood, I'm afraid, by the American citizenry, the significance of community development as an approach to relate to the problems of the peoples in the developing world. There ought to be a great deal more generous of in the United States. I do congratulate on all you, particularly on the right. This Trickle Up Program that you two developed, that the very, very best as you begin to move on into the future.
And we're very fortunate to be interviewed by yourself, who has had experience and done.
Yeah, well, we did. Yeah, they had that going down there. See, kind of community development, foreign policy initiative in the United States. I think as much as those people benefit, I think the United States could benefit by having some way of acting the. How did you put it? We ourselves, right? One thing we do not have on television, even though it is unlimited time. I'm sorry, we run right out of time. But it's been a little warm under the sun and sun. But in any case, I do want to remind you, it's been your pleasure to have the perception of my immediate left. Mr. Leet is and Mildred and my father, Robbins, and they are the co-director of an truly exciting program that we've been able to share some of the dimensions of that with you. I'm sorry we're running right out of time for this. Tune in again next week. We do like to say there's always good, interesting, sometimes filled, and it's a responsible talk. Mr. and Mrs. Leet, once again, thank you really very, very much indeed for everything.
Great. Thank you.